Good morning. My name is Minna and I am going to talk to you about CPU. We are going to explain 7 main points about it: definition, history, features, components, types, functions, summary. Let's start with definition. A processor CPU is the logic circuitry that responds to and processes the basic instructions that drive a computer. The CPU is seen as the main and the most crucial integrated circuit chip in a computer, as it is responsible for interpreting most computers' commands. CPUs will perform most basic arithmetic logic and I/O operations, as well as allocate commands for other chips and components running in a computer. Processors can be found in PCs, smartphones, tablets, and other computers. The two main competitors in the processor market are Intel and AMD. Let's move to the next point: history. Italian physicist Federico invented the first commercial CPU, the first commercial microprocessor, BCD-based Intel 4004. Was released by Intel in 1971. In March 1972, Intel produced a microprocessor with an 8-bit architecture. The 8008 and integrated PMOS logic re-implementation of the transistor logic TTL based data point 2200 CPU. CPU has 9 features and they are as follows. First feature: processor speed. The processor frequency is the speed at which the processor operates internally and measured in gigahertz, such as 3.3 gigahertz. Second one, socket at the chipset, is a physical receptacle that the CPU plugs into the chipset, is the chip on the motherboard that handles the connection and the I/O. Next one, processor architectures. In this screen, we compared 3 types of it. Next point, multiprocessing abilities. And it has multiprocessing, multi-reading, multiprocessing, dual processor. Memory cache is a technique in which computer applications store data temporarily in the computer's main memory, such as RAM. Next point, security. EDB, execute disabled bit, requires a compatible OS. You can enable it using the BIOS or UEFI setup screen. It's important to remember that even though EDB can stop malware from executing, it cannot remove it. You still need to use anti-malware software to remove the malware. Then, the memory features that the processor can support. In this screen, we explain the memory management from CPU to cache, RAM, virtual memory, disk storage. Then, support for virtualization. Most processors sold today support virtualization. The features must be enabled in UEFI or BIOS setup. Last point, integrated graphics is a processor that manipulate graphic data to form the image on a monitor screen.
Then we're going to talk about the components in the CPU. There are 2 primary components in the CPU. The first one is the arithmetic logic unit and the second one is the control unit. The arithmetic logic unit performs mathematical, logical, and decision operations. The control unit directs all the process of the operations. والصورة الجاية هنشرح فيها ازاي الماشين سايكل بتاع التو components دول. هنبدأ الأول من المين memory. We first fetch the instruction from the memory, then we decode it, these instructions into commands in the control unit, then we execute these commands in the ALU, arithmetic logic unit, then lastly we store these results in the memory, and so on. This machine cycle repeats itself. Then we're going to talk about the types of the CPU. These components are dependent and powerful when linked to CPU, so it's necessary to choose the right one and program it. In this next slide, we're going to talk about each type of these cores separately. First, we have the single core. It is the oldest type of CPU which is available and employed in most of the personal and official computers. The single core CPU can execute only one command at a time and it's not efficient in multitasking. Then we have the dual core. It is a single CPU that comprises of two strong cores and functions like dual CPU acting like one. Unlike the CPU with a single core, the processor must switch back and forth within a variable array of data streams, and if thread is executed. Thirdly, we're going to talk about the quad core. It doesn't signify any single operation which is 4 times faster rapid than others. Although the application and program execute on it by a CMT code, it will fasten the speed and becomes unnoticeable. Such types of CPU are used in people who need to execute multiple different programs at the same time. As gamers, series of Supreme Commander that is optimized in multiple core CPU. Fourthly, we're going to talk about the Hexa-core. It is another multiple core processor which is available with 6 cores and can execute the task which works rapidly than the quad core and the dual core processors. Fifthly, we're going to talk about the octa-core. It's a trending nowadays. The octa-core processors comprises of a reduced set of quad core processors that divides the different activities between the various types. Many times the minimal powered core sets are employed to produce advanced tasks. If there is any emergency or a requirement, the rapid 4 sets of cores will be kicked in. Lastly, we're going to talk about the Deca-core. Deca-core is available with 10 independent systems that are deployed to execute and manage the tasks that is successful than other processors that are developed until now. Owning a PC or any device made with a Deca-core processor is the best option and very successful in multitasking. Deca-core processors are trending with its advanced features nowadays.
How the CPU functions. 1. The CPU receives the data when the computer inputs the data through input devices such as keyboard or mouse. 2. After this, the CPU processes this input's data performing calculations and technical algorithms. 3. Then CPU provides the processed data through output devices such as on the monitor screen. 4. The CPU also stores the processed data in the form of a cache for future use. Summary. The CPU is the brain of a computer, containing all the circuitry needed to process input, store data, and output results. The CPU is constantly following instructions of computer programs that tell it which data to process and how to process it. Without a CPU, we couldn't run programs on a computer.
Finally, we want to thank you all for listening to our presentation. Hopefully you like it. And this was Team MIS 404.